So I just got back from a job interview. I'm pretty excited. I guess that's why I'm dressed this way. Just got back from the interview and thought I would record a quick video here. The interview got me thinking. I specifically looked for and found this job based on nostalgia. When I was 21 and 22, I worked at a big chain pawn shop called Cash Converters. And looking back, reflecting on my life, that was my favorite job of all time. Now, I'm in a position in my life where I don't have to worry too much about, making the big bucks and that sort of thing. I'm more concerned with doing something that really fulfills me, that I'm really interested in. So I began to look for a job in either a video game store or a pawn shop or somewhere where I could not only interact with cool stuff that I enjoy, like video games and electronics and that sort of thing, but also interact with customers and help, just generally nerd out and talk to people about cool stuff. And, I just wanted to kind of reflect on what it's like to work in an environment like that. Now, I know a lot of people really dream about working in a video game store specifically. It's not necessarily as fun as you would think, but there are some really great things about working in particularly the secondhand market. Some of my best memories of working at a pawn shop are all of the cool stuff that comes in. You've got a constantly rotating stock. It's not like working at another retail store with new stuff where you've got a lockdown inventory. You've got a specific thing in the, you carry specific brands and you carry specific items. Say in a department store, you may have an electronics section that does sell video games, but they only bring in the biggest and the best games, or they only bring in, popular items, that sort of thing. Whereas when you're working in a pawn shop or a thrift store or any kind of secondhand store, like even a mom and pop video game store, you never know what you're going to get in from day to day. And that can make your job really interesting. I've seen some fantastic things, and you know what? I ended up being the best customer of the place that I worked at, because there were so many amazing things that came in that I was able to build my collection and furnish my house and buy some really cool, audio video equipment and recording equipment and things like that, all because I was able to work in an environment where all kinds of crazy things were coming in every day, and I was able to get these things for really discounted prices because I worked there. Now, typically in a pawn shop, they will give you, a discount that's something like maybe 10 or 15 or 20% over the cost that they paid for the item. So I can remember back when I was, 21, 22, as I say. Now, this was around the year 2000. I remember specifically a really high-end pair of PSB reference speakers. PSB is a Canadian speaker company, and they make some fantastic speakers. And this beautiful, beautiful set of mahogany PSB speakers came in, and the buyer was able to get them for an absolute steal. I mean, these were $600 to $800 speakers, and I think he paid $100 for them. And I was able to pick these speakers up for, I think, about $150, which they took off my check over a period of 2 or 3 weeks to kind of spread it out for me. And I remember these speakers were just phenomenal. Now, in this day and age, people don't really have audio-video equipment in their house unless they're enthusiasts like I am. I don't really have the room for my full audio-video setup, so I have it in storage right now. But I can also remember buying a amazing Harman Kardon amplifier receiver. I've since upgraded it, but buying things like CDs and DVDs and laser discs and video games, video game systems. It's absolutely amazing the kind of thing that comes into a shop like that, and it leads to some really interesting conversations, because your customers when they're coming into the store, they never know what they're going to find either. So they don't even know what they're looking for most of the time when they come in. Sure, you've got a customer that might be coming in looking for a camera or looking for a video game system or something, but a lot of the times the conversations that you can develop in a setting like that are really amazing, because you'll have somebody that will come in and maybe they're looking at the video games, and you ask them, oh hey, are you a gamer, what are your favorite systems and that sort of thing. And sometimes the conversations that ensue from a situation like that, you find out somebody is an avid 3DO collector or something, and maybe you don't have any 3DO games in the store, but through developing a relationship with the customer in that conversation, you can guide them to something that maybe they wouldn't have thought of before, or maybe they have thought of but they didn't really notice that you had. It's a lot of fun. Some of my memories, we had this specific guy, we actually had a couple of guys back at the old store that would go to auction sales and thrift stores, and they would actually have kind of a little side business buying and selling to the pawn shop. So this one guy, Dave, he would go to auction sales every, I think it was Saturday and Thursday, I think it was, and he would come in at about 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, just before we closed, with a pile of stuff that he had bought at the auction for really good prices and resell it to us. And some of the stuff that he bought us was fantastic, and that guy would come in almost every day, and he would buy and he would sell, but it was amazing some of the stuff that he would bring us in. Obviously he's making kind of a little part-time income off this as well, but I remember he brought in an old Atari 2600, and he didn't know what it was. It was an Atari 2600, the old wood grain style one, and he had a box of about 50 games, and most of them were in box. Now, some of you may remember, Atari 2600 now is super cheap to collect for, but in the late 90s and early 2000s, at the beginning of the eBay era, Atari 2600 games were selling like absolute hotcakes, and they were getting really good prices for them. Prices similar to what you would expect, say, N64 or Super Nintendo to get right now. Atari 2600 was getting those prices, $50, $60 a game, and this guy brought in 50 games at least, all in boxes, and there was some really great games there. And he sold us this entire box. He didn't really know what he had, he just thought it was junk. He sold us this entire box for, I would doubt that we paid more than $100 for the 2600, a couple of controllers, and the 50 games. Probably around $100 we paid him. And I was able to sell that collection over a period of weeks to various people, not only online, but coming into the store for some outrageous prices. I think we made about $2,000 off of that collection that he brought in. And, being that he's a regular seller to us, he actually knew, the system and how it works, and he saw some of these games priced on the shelf for the prices, and he didn't really mind, because I think he paid $1 for the box. So he made it, $100 off of $1, and we made probably $2,000 off of $100. And, everybody was happy. I remember actually going over to his house one time, because he wanted to show me his stereo setup, because I was, super passionate about AV, stereos back in the day. And this guy had collected an incredible amount of audio-video equipment in his apartment. He had this unbelievable stereo with like Bang & Olufsen speakers, and he had a Pioneer 200, I believe it was a 100 or 200 disc CD changer. Just absolutely amazing stuff. And that's what it was like back in the day. It was a real hustle bustle. Now in my 40s, I want to kind of get back into a job that sort of gives me that nostalgia and that feeling of hustle and bustle. But as I understand it, the industry's changed a little bit. Now people pay, like stores pay a little bit more for things, and they sell a little bit higher. I've noticed pawn shop prices creeping up. I recently bought a new 3DS XL at actually this pawn shop that I'm applying for a job at, and the price was pretty good. I think I got it for about $100 Canadian. It was like $90 or something, plus tax. And it was a little bit scuffed up, but the condition was generally probably a 7 out of 10. And, for $100, I mean, they retail for over 200 brand new, so I was, fairly happy to get that. But I remember back in the day, we would have sold something like, a Game Boy or a Game Boy Advance or something like that for probably more like, $50 or $60, but I guess that's inflation for you, 20 years ago. Time really flies, so you sometimes forget about inflation when you're, remembering the good old days of how cheap things were and how easy they were to get. But anyways, guys, I just wanted to kind of, share this little piece of myself, a little bit of, memories from the good old days. But if you've ever worked at a pawn shop or a video game store, or if you've ever thought about working at a video game store or a pawn shop, please drop a comment and tell me your experience. I would really like to hear some of your stories as to, what it was like for you working in a pawn shop, whether it was 20 years ago or whether it was, today, yesterday. I'm really interested to get an idea of what I'm getting into, going back into that market today, in 2020, and, see what things are going to be like. So drop me a comment, drop a like, subscribe if you haven't already. I would appreciate it. That really helps my channel. Thank you very much, guys. Stay classy.